My name is Caroline Hildreth. I'm a principal from a Danish company called Netcompany. We're an IT and tech consultancy, and I'm also a board director of ICS UK. So we're going to get into a conversation today about where active travel in the UK is going, what part it will play in the integrated transport network and the role of technology in supporting it. I think it's been good because today there's been a lot of talk about multimodal transport, and so it's great to move on to the active travel. So I'm someone that doesn't actually work within active travel, so I wanted to start off with understanding a bit more as to what you think the definition of active travel is, especially as I do sometimes hear micromobility being dragged into that sort of bundle. So it would be great to understand your perspective of that.
Okay, so thank you for that. So by way of introduction, for those that don't know me, I'm Darren Capes. I'm ITS policy lead at the Department for Transport. So I'm basically responsible for intelligent transport systems policy, and particularly how that relates to local authorities. So not so much national highways, but how current technology and emerging technology is delivered and is developed and like in local authorities, which means I do have a particular interest in active travel because, of course, you know, the road network that is in the ownership of the local authorities is pretty much all the roads in our cities. There aren't many strategic roads in our cities. So I very much deal with the bodies that have to think very much about active travel. Now, I have a very particular definition of active travel, which works for me and therefore is the one I'm interested in. And that is those modes where there is some form of human power. And thinking about that particularly in terms of ITS. Traditionally, ITS has been about managing traffic signals and managing urban congestion, which is about managing vehicles. That's traditionally what we've done. And in terms of that use of technology in the road infrastructure, we've traditionally kind of let the cyclists and the pedestrians get on with it themselves. You know, we provide pedestrian crossings and the like, but fundamentally we don't really include them in that technology package. And same to some extent with buses, although as Stephen Fiddler mentioned earlier, bus priority is and will continue to be a key element of ITS. The reason for that definition is because the future has to be different. The future, and as we implement new technology on the transport network, it has to deliver for active travel in the same way that it delivers for people in vehicles. We have to use technology to ensure that active travel becomes more attractive, that we actively think about the safety of pedestrians and cyclists and wheelchair users and others on the network, because actually that's one of the key ways in which we will make it more attractive and ensure that we get the modal shift into those modes. So as we think about technology going forward, and this is the challenge for me as a policy lead, and this is the challenge for the sector, we have to think about how we use technology to better support active travel in the way that over many years we've developed it to support vehicle-based travel.
And Julian.
Well, I think the fundamental definition was very well picked up there. So yes, basically active travel by very definition is the role of travelling while being active, so whether that's cycling or walking, and that includes e-bikes as well. You get 70% of the cardio exercise on an electric bike that you get on a regular bike, so they're not cheating. For anyone out there who seems to think that electric bikes are cheating, definitely not. But critically, I think, you know, quite often what's overlooked with them is they are two things. Number one, they are the lowest carbon form of transport, whether you're walking or cycling. That's far lower carbon than anything else. And if we're going to hit carbon targets, we need that as part of the overall mix. I think the second thing is they're catalysts to other modes of transport. They very much fulfill a role of getting people onto mass transit that would otherwise result in people using single occupancy private use cars. So I think, you know, if you want a definition of them, they are a way of moving around in an incredibly low carbon way, number one. Number two, they're a catalyst to other modes of multiple utilisation transport.
Fabulous, thank you. So obviously we've heard a lot about the government's integrated transport strategy. How do you think active travel fits into that plan, and what more can be done to increase that uptake of active travel?
Well, I think what he said, basically. I think, you know, it is obviously key to ensuring that we meet our targets in terms of emissions, in terms of carbon, in terms of reducing road user casualties. It's key that we firstly promote greater use of active travel, and we more importantly ensure it's safe and attractive, and it's something we want to encourage people to do more of. I think that we can't have a national transport strategy. We can't have an integrated strategy that doesn't fundamentally based around that. And ensuring that where journeys can be made by some form of totally or partially human-powered means, then we support that as being the primary way that those journeys are made. And there are lots of things we can do. So we can work around how we make those safer. We can work around how we provide better data to allow people to make better journey choices. We can work with how we work with the private sector, with Google and with Waze and with other providers who increasingly are the tool of choice of people making journey choices. We need to ensure that the right data is in there. We need to ensure that the right facilities are there to allow people to make those choices. And that needs to be delivered as part of a coordinated plan. We can't have a plan for cyclists, a plan for walkers, a plan for managing congestion. It has to be one plan. It's one network. It has to be managed as one piece of infrastructure. And we ensure that actually, going back to the principles that were established many years ago, we think about road users in terms of a hierarchy of how we want people to travel, from walking at the top through cycling down to car-borne commuting. And we have to make sure that we use the limited capacity that we have, because we can't really, in most UK cities, we don't have the space to build segregated facilities, to put new infrastructure in the ground. We have to make sure that we make the right choices in how we divide up that limited physical infrastructure we have. And going back to my area of interest, I think technology is a key way in which we will deliver that.
And we will touch on that technology and data aspect in a second, but it'd be good, Julian, to understand how you think we can increase that uptake in active travel.
So I have a similar viewpoint, but perhaps coming from a slightly different direction. So in terms of integration, when we talk about integrated transport strategies, we're very often talking about digital solutions. We're often talking about that type of thing. I think there's a more fundamental thing that needs to be addressed first, and anyone who rides a bike or crosses a junction in the UK will know what I'm talking about. It's cultural. When we talk about cyclists and drivers, we're talking about them like they're different species, like they're completely different. Nobody talks about trainists and tramists and busists like they're different people, and yet the moment we talk about people in cars or people in bikes, we treat them like different animals. And there's this kind of whole kind of tribalisation and this kind of antagonistic nature around it. And actually, if we're going to get more people using active travel, they need to feel safe and confident. Now, we know that great steps are made. The Highway Code now recognises the hierarchy of road use. Anyone who doesn't know, or anyone wants to scream it at a driver, it's parts H1 through to H3 they need to be looking at. But still, the reality is you can write what you like. If it's not culturally embedded into society, it's not going to make a difference. And then you're forced to resort to artificial constructs like segregated cycling, which we have a lot of in London. Great. But why is segregated cycling there? It's there because people don't feel safe otherwise. Now, I was lucky enough to spend a decade living in Amsterdam. Everyone talks about how magnificent the cycling infrastructure is in the Netherlands. That's not the secret of the good cycling in the Netherlands. It's the fact that drivers are terrified of getting into a tangle with a cyclist because they will be the losers. If you actually cycle through the centre of Amsterdam, there's very few cycle lanes. Very few cycle lanes. Most of that area is actually shared space. It's the fact that people feel safe to use that safe shared space, which they don't in the UK at the moment. So if we want to talk about integrated transport, we've got to start integrating the different users of transport and then apply digital solutions to enable it.
And I think there's an interesting addition to that, and I think you're taking that point about being different species. We often look at the Netherlands and say, well, they are different people, they all cycle because that's culturally the way they are. And that's not true. Actually, car ownership in the Netherlands is higher than in the UK. More people own cars in the Netherlands than they do in the UK. They just don't see it as a tribal thing in the same degree that we do. And they are much more willing to not see themselves just as a car driver, but see themselves as somebody who will make the right transport choice for the right journey. And I think that's important because that makes the difference between us seem less, and it makes this difference seem maybe less insurmountable.
Obviously, safety is a huge factor as to why people might decide not to travel using active travel means. Do you think, Darren, that traffic management and technology can support active travel to make people feel safer?
Absolutely. I think it's slightly more nuanced than that. I don't think it's safety. I think it's the fear of being unsafe. I think there's a strong... and you're right, there are accidents. Tragically, there are too many accidents involving pedestrians and cyclists. But there is also a strong fear And part of what we need to do is about reducing that level, that fear of danger, not just the danger. But I think you're right. I think there is a lot we can do. There's a lot we can do with the technologies that we're starting to see now that allow us to better detect different types of vehicles. And we're seeing the ability to use things like video technologies and radar technologies to detect cyclists, to detect pedestrians, to provide better crossing facilities that are more reactive to what people need. We need to work with the vehicle sector. Vehicles, again, are also capable of detecting pedestrians and cyclists. There is opportunities now to use that, to make vehicle drivers more aware of pedestrians and cyclists. And as we move towards connected vehicles and autonomy, I would want to see a world where that technology makes it increasingly hard to actually drive a vehicle into a pedestrian. I want to see technologies that first warn you not to do that, and secondly, and in the future, maybe actually physically stop you from doing that. And we see technologies now like automatic lane keeping. The vehicles that we see now will keep you in lane on a road, and they will warn you when you try and stray out of that lane. Well, why can't that same technology be used to warn you of adjacent pedestrians and cyclists, and actually enforce powers H1 to H3 of the Highway Code using the technology in the vehicle? I think that the basic point is that there's a whole suite of technologies that are available now in the network infrastructure and in vehicle infrastructure and in automotive world, which is increasingly becoming ubiquitous and widely used. It's for us to decide what we want to do with that technology. It's for us to decide what services we want that technology to deliver. And one of those services should be enhanced safety and enhanced protection for pedestrians and cyclists.
So decisions are normally based on collating data, understanding the purpose and the outcome that you're driving. Julian, do you think there's enough data about walking and cycling?
No, would be the short answer. I'm quite often faced with... I'm sorry, I should have said, by the way, these aren't just on for show. I do actually work for Brompton Bicycles. Yeah, I mean, quite often when I'm talking to local authorities, they're screaming out for more data along these things, and it's just not systematically collated in this country. I mean, I struggled today. I was doing a little bit of ChatGPT. I've finally learned what AI is in my dotage, and quite enjoying it. And I was trying to collate some data on what the spend per capita is on cycling and active travel and on road infrastructure, and I could find it for isolated cases. London, it's quite good. You can get London data quite readily. And I can tell you exactly how much is spent per capita on roads. It's £148 per capita per year. In 2022, which is the last bit of data I could find, it was £10 on walking and cycling. And it should be £50 according to Ipsos. But trying to get any granularity on that, forget it. So when you're trying to build cases for safety in cycling, to say, look, where there's infrastructure you're getting to mission, it's very hard to get that level of data.
Darren, do you have any views as to how we could gather more data?
Well, again, I think there are technology answers to that. We see technology available now that allows us to count pedestrians and cyclists. There are companies out there, companies are probably present here today that will supply you with camera technology that will allow you to very accurately count pedestrians and cyclists and identify them in complex vehicle flows as well. So the technology is there to do it. Maybe what's lacking is the business case as to why you should do it. And actually, maybe as a government, maybe as a sector, we need to be more demanding of the data that people collect, because that then will drive people to use the types of technologies that allow them to do that. And maybe, generally we've talked quite widely about the fact that the way that we measure economic benefit, the way that we measure the benefit and cost of building infrastructure is again very focused on providing capacity for vehicles, and we need to find ways of changing that. We need to find ways of properly costing the benefit of pedestrian and cycling, because if we do that, then actually collecting the data to allow us to build better, more accurate economic models of why we should invest in pedestrian and cycling, it kind of becomes self-fulfilling then. But again, I think a bit like the previous question, the technology to do this is there. What is maybe lacking is the impetus to want to do it, and that's maybe what we need to concentrate on.
Just want to pick up on one point there, because it's a really important one. When people start talking about the benefits of walking and cycling, it's quite often done in kind of holistic ways, almost like a kind of a hair shirt and a penitent, because it's good for you, because you should be doing it. The reality is, all the analysis that's been done shows that for every £1 you spend on getting active travel in place, there's 3 times the saving coming back at a local and national level. That's in case of reductions of costs for NHS, absenteeism, benefits to the economy from people being naturally more healthy. The business case is there. I mean, Chris Boardman spoke recently at Active Travel England and said, and forgive me, I won't get the statistic right, it's not one I wrote down today, but it was something like a third of the savings that the NHS needs to achieve between now and 2030 could be achieved simply by achieving the active travel targets we've set for the same period. So one will wash the hand of the other. It's not a case of having to make swinging cuts in terms of administrators or swinging cuts in the case of doctors and nurses. It's getting more people cycling will prevent the symptoms in the first place. That's how we need to be looking at these things.
Yeah. So Julian, I understand you're chair of the Urban Mobility Partnership. Can you tell us a bit more about that organisation and what it's trying to achieve?
Oh, go on then. Since you are so nicely. So, Urban Mobility Partnership was formulated at a place not so far away from here. It is a collective of different transport providers. So the whole point was, I was on a panel like this with a chap called Ben Lawson from Enterprise, and we both used the same statistic, which was the number of people using single occupancy privately used cars. And it was like 70-something% for commuting. I can't remember the statistic now. But because we both used the same stat, we sat after and said, well, aren't we trying to achieve the same thing? Aren't we both trying to do it? So we kind of went away. And the Urban Mobility Partnership is a car club operator, Enterprise Brompton, Dot for bike share. It's got Stagecoach for buses, Mobility Ways. It's everyone who's got one single common interest involved, which is reduce the number of journeys taken in the single occupancy privately used cars. And the reason why I use the word collective rather than any other term is because there's no formal commercial agreement. We all just have this single purpose, which is to find ways to reduce it, to work together and work as far as we can agnostically. So just talk about why alternatives to sitting alone in a car is better. That's it.
Fab, thank you. As I said, I'm not from the active travel world, so that was a good understanding. So last question, and then we'll turn to the floor. So you've got a few minutes to start thinking if you've got any questions for our panel. But Darren, the government recently cancelled the funding for the Intelligent Traffic Management Scheme. Do you see that returning, and do you think that that could be used to support the active travel ambitions?
Whew.
That's a good one.
There's a question to ask a civil servant. I have no comment. No, seriously. So to step back a little bit, we provided funding recently to enhance and tune up traffic signal and traffic management in UK cities, and to deal with obsolescent equipment. We provided £50 million to do that, and that's been really key, because that's allowed authorities to start to uplift the core technology that we use on streets to a higher level, a better maintained, more capable level, which is actually really important, and having the equipment that we have on streets working more effectively is probably the biggest, most cost-effective change we can make in our cities to improve how urban transport works. And then leading on from that, we also aspire to provide funding to allow local authorities to start to implement emerging technologies, and some of the things we've talked about here. So to use technologies that allow for better modelling of pedestrian and cycling, better management of active travel, better data collection and all these types of things, and use some of the technologies that we know are available now. Use some of the technologies that use AI, that work around digital twins, use machine learning, use the types of things that we know are possible, but are quite hard to get local authorities to invest in, because it's quite a risky thing to buy new technology using public money, and so it should be. It's my tax people are spending. I want them to do it in a very sensible way. So it's quite hard sometimes to get the public sector to invest in new emerging technologies that might have a slightly greater risk potential than traditional technologies do. So ITMF, the Intelligent Traffic Management Fund, was intended to provide money to allow people to do that, and set up some beacons around the country showing how new technology could provide a way of dealing with the subjects we've been talking about here, and providing a better mix of management of the network than we've seen in the past. Sadly, that for various reasons didn't make it through the change of government. It was one of the things that, for reasons of the way it was potentially funded, was chopped by the incoming Chancellor, and lots of reasons why that happened. The one thing that nobody has ever said was that fundamentally that was a stupid thing to do. No one said that. The way it was arranged and the fact it was clearly a Conservative government policy kind of counted against it, so we ended up with it not going forward. The fact that we need to engender more use of emerging technologies in local authorities has not gone away. And the fact that the current government has spoken very clearly about its desire to see AI more widely used across society, to see the principle of digital twins used more widely across society, to see connected vehicle data as a key way of, and Sam Rose said earlier, using data is probably the key to opening up a lot of services and a lot of new services. These are fundamental things we need to do. Now, if we're going to deliver those services, we need to have local authorities uplifting the quality, the type of technology they use on street now. We still need that innovative technology on street to allow those services that we aspire to see actually be rolled out. So that's a kind of a long way of saying that we are in the middle of a spending review. That spending review may well, and I do hope it does, result in funding to allow us to implement AI and machine learning and digital twins and all these other things. If we do that, then funding to uplift the technology we currently have to be able to support those types of services feels like a very logical step. So I don't know the answer to that because I don't have a crystal ball, and if I did, it would be a government one, and I wouldn't be able to tell you what it told me. But if I could, I would suggest that assuming funding in some way comes out of the spending review to allow us to do these new things, then some new form of ITMF to kind of upgrade the technology we have on streets now feels like a logical part of that. So I've been speaking to local authorities, and ITMF was going to be very popular. There were lots of people getting very interested in putting bids together, and lots of consortia across the country is doing some really good work around that. What I've been telling people is that work, don't scrunch it up and throw it in the bin. Keep the work you've done. Keep the thoughts you had and the aspirations you had and the consortia you formed, because that may well be useful in the future. In the near future, we may well be asking you similar questions and proposing similar challenges in terms of how you would spend that money. So just keep that stuff warm somewhere, because it may well come up again.
Great. We're going to open to the floor now. So does anyone have any questions for our panels? I think we've got one there.
Thanks. Alistair Cobb, ITS Director at SCA. I guess a little bit surprised, given the topic, not to hear the subject of school streets come up today, and somewhat of a vested interest, given the positive experience we've had working with local authorities across the country on this subject. But does the panel think that further rollout of these sorts of schemes and other schemes that can encourage active travel, such as livable neighbourhoods and so on, is part of the answer here?
Oh, I'm more than happy to take that one. I think school streets is an incredibly important part of the mix. Ultimately, we're seeing the uptake of cycling declining in under 21-year-olds because parents don't feel it's safe for their children to be cycling. And I can't think of anything more devastating to say than that. I mean, I have a 15-year-old teenager thing, hairy brute, at home, and I get the ick when he cycles to school. It doesn't stop me letting him cycle, but I get the ick because I know what the roads are like. And I think if we don't make it more kind of socially acceptable, because I have also been challenged as a parent who dares to let their child cycle to school, whether I'm endangering his life. So I think school streets are vital, and I think living streets, and I'm glad you used that rather than the more controversial term that's been used, is incredibly important as well. And again, going back to this whole tribalism thing, that the noisy minority, the ability for a few people to completely derail what are in fact incredibly positive and impactful things for communities. It's something, but it takes political courage, it takes political will, because quite often sorry to say it, and I'll say it out loud, I'll say the quiet bit out loud, the car lobby are very, very good at putting the fear into local and national politicians to get them to row back from these things. And I think, it takes a lot of courage, and I think we need to help our politicians have that courage.
Darren, do you have a view?
I think our previous government had a reaction against what happened after was part of COVID. A lot of good things came out of that, and I won't use the term that you didn't use. A lot of good things came out of that about how we thought about neighbourhoods. We saw what happened in Wales with the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, and I think that the previous government had a reaction against that, and fair enough. The new government has a reaction against that reaction, I think. And I think those kind of things are more on the agenda than they were under the last government. I think that this will form part of the kind of localism agenda and the devolution agenda, in that I think it will, we as a government are likely to let local authorities, let local communities increasingly decide what they want to do. And I think we will obviously support that with guidance, and we may well support it with funding. We may well, again, support it with technology to help enforce these types of measures. But I think increasingly it will be about communities to decide for themselves how they want to implement that.
I think we had a question here.
Hi, John Paddington from Ertico. This is one of my favourite topics, as we're a car-free household, so I could go on lots of questions about it. But one of the things I was wondering about was funding. We know that active travel walking can have a huge health benefit. We know there's a huge amount of pressures on the UK government about health, social care, etc. I was wondering, is there a way we can help Darren make a case that actually you put a small amount of funding to improve traffic signals, improve active mobility, but actually we'll get some huge benefits more widely?
Yes, I think there is. I think there's some stuff the sector can be doing about, and ITS UK is a perfect body maybe to do that, is to start to tell those stories, start to work, gather experience from local authorities, from the sector, to make a case to government and to advocate for that type of thing, because government does listen to that. We absolutely don't believe we have all the answers. And I think having a sector which is able to give us some clear stories about why we should be investing in that way is useful. I think there are places in which we in government are going to do research. So we're certainly going to do research around the economic benefits of investing in traffic technology. That will aim to A, show the benefit internally of why we should put government money into that, but B, help produce guidance for local authorities to also write business cases to do that. As and when we come out and ask you to support us with that and help us with data and help us with experiences, then engage with us and do that. But I think that there is a growing acceptance in local government that the traditional way, in which the web tag way that we use cost and benefit to analyse infrastructure investment is outdated, and I think there will be increasing requests from government to help us with that, and so I think at the moment the advice really is stand ready to help us when we come and ask.
I'll just kind of go back to something I said a little bit earlier. Active Travel England actually have some very, very good analysis where they've costed through. And, going back to Chris Bourman, I'm sorry to use him again, but he is their chair and he is a very spoken, of course, integrated transport's now in his brief as well. Yeah. So a good champion to have there as well. He said in Parliament 3 weeks ago, he said, the head's there. The data's there. It exists. He says, what we now need to do is get the heart to follow. Because, if you just put numbers on a page tomorrow, it should be a no-brainer to be investing into active travel as walking and cycling. The numbers just stack up. Why is it not happening? Because the heart's not there yet, so we need to bring the heart with it as well.
Fab, we're at time now, so I'd like to ask you all to join me in thanking the panel. It's been a really great discussion, so thank you.